Alright, so my name's BedN, and this video is going to be about my proposal for a new leaderboard system for iceboat racing, and specifically on this server, which is FrostHex. The IP will be in the description. So please do check the description or the chapters for this video. That will cover the topic that I'm actually speaking about at whatever specific moment in the video. And so the first thing I want to cover is the current situation with the leaderboards, and it's very simple. You have all these different tracks, so you have all these different tracks, right? So you have a separate leaderboard for each one, and it definitely works fine. There's no issues with that, but I think there is a more fun way to do that, and I'll cover the pros, cons, just see the chapters, and I will cover as much as I can think of. The general premise of this is that for every position that you have on a leaderboard for a specific track, you'll be assigned a certain amount of points or some sort of value that will accumulate across all tracks and be considered for your profile, and then that is what's used to compare you to other people. And I will go into more detail about why this should be done, what the actual pros of this are later in the video, but I just want to explain the premise of it first, and it will make sense, hopefully. Okay, so I've been playing around with this equation, and what this does, it takes in a player's position on the leaderboard, like first or 10th or whatever, and then it converts that into the weight that should be used to accumulate across all of the tracks. And of course, this is not final. I'm just playing about with stuff that could work. It's probably more advanced than this inverse. I'm not a math professor. There are probably more clever people who could think of a better way to do this. And it could also be scaled, so you don't get one, maybe it's like out of 100, and then it adds up and you have a number maybe in the tens of thousands or something similar. So let's say there are 3 tracks and you have first place on one, 10th on another, and 50th on the third. Then you would have about 2.1 units, or 2.1 of this score, okay? So I think that's a very simple thing to understand. So yes. And okay, so I'm going on to the advantages and disadvantages of doing this, and if I'm honest, I do not know much about the boat racing community, okay? I just think this could be a fairly cool addition to the server. There are probably a lot of people, maybe more than half, who would dislike the idea of this, but I think I'd share it just because I think it's interesting. And there's 2 key things that I want to mention, and this is because of how the weighting system would be done. So the difference between going from second to first place is greater than, say, 10th to 9th, right? Because it's more impressive because you've halved your leaderboard position rather than done 10% of it. For that reason, the incentive that people already have to grind a particular track will remain. So a lot of this server is, I know some people spend hours on a track so they can get a perfect time, and they take pleasure from that, and I think that's very cool. And this will stay because every leaderboard position, especially when you get to the upper echelons of the top players in the top 10 of a specific track, those leaderboard positions would still have a great incentive for people to achieve them, so you would still keep the fun of people who want to spend hours on a particular track. But it also solves a problem, or maybe not a problem, but something that I think could be a benefit to change about the server. You have all of these tracks which will have a different amount of people playing on them, and that's the key thing. So this first track, for instance, is probably my best guess as the most played track. The first one is a very simple one. I can only get position 92 on it, just into the top 100. Even though it's the same racing ability that I have, I can only get 92nd place on this, whereas I can get top 10 into other tracks, just because less people have played them, right? So it's the same percentile sort of business. So this would mean that players have a reason to play tracks they otherwise wouldn't play. So if there's a track that 2 people have played, you might not have a reason to try and get a good time on it because you're saying, oh, the leaderboard's empty, like 30 people have played this, why would I put time into getting a good time when I could just do something that more people have played? So these less played tracks would have easier to obtain leaderboard positions, which means over time every track will be filled up and people will spend time trying a variety of tracks rather than just specific ones. So I think this is good for the server because it means that the maps people do spend a lot of time building will be experienced by more people and for longer for each person. And also for the players because it gives them a reason to try different maps. And just because of how distributions work, it means that when a new player joins, they'll be able to see their rank climb very quick, and the top players will still be able to dedicate themselves into performing very well and climbing those couple very difficult final leaderboard positions. And of course there are some disadvantages. So one is, as I just mentioned, every player will have an incentive to play every track, and that will include the ones that aren't very fun. If there's a track that is arbitrarily boring or long or unenjoyable to play, people will still be trying to do well on it and get a good leaderboard position, which maybe is just part of the game, maybe it could be seen as a disadvantage. And while overall I think this method actually balances 2 things, you have the player's skill level and the amount of playtime that someone has played on the server. Both of which I think should be rewarded in some different weight. I don't know what that weight is. So I think even if you had a player suddenly join and they were infinitely skilled, they would still have to play maybe for a couple hours to start climbing the rankings and get to the very top. They couldn't just join, do one thing, and then immediately become number one. And similarly, you can't have someone, even if they play for months, if they aren't good, they can't reach number one, but they can still build up better times on all the tracks and slowly climb the leaderboard. Which you could probably argue would actually be a very good way to get someone to improve, because they'll just be trying out all these different tracks. But depending on the specifics of how this is implemented, it could be that new players feel it's very hard to progress, which of course you do not want on a server. You'll lose players, lose motivation. One other problem I have just thought of is that now the incentive for cheating would be a lot higher. I think there's already a very good anti-cheat, which is good. If there's not, then this could be a problem, because at the moment if someone cheats, it will only affect the leaderboards for that specific course or track, whereas with this it would give them a reason to cheat on all tracks, so that would definitely need to be addressed if there is not already a very good anti-cheat. So that's all of the advantages and disadvantages I can think of right now. There's probably a million that I've missed. Please do have a conversation about it in the comments if you want to add anything to this. I'll also quickly mention the logistics about adding this. So I'm not exactly sure how they store their data about player times, player leaderboards, all that. Also, so I'm imagining the way they would do it is you'd have something that you can call on a player, and that would loop through all tracks, get the leaderboard position for that player, then calculate those weights and sum them, and update the player's total score. Then every now and again you would sort every single player. That shouldn't be too bad, right? Like, I mean, computers are very fast, so it should be very doable. But obviously not running constantly, that wouldn't be necessary. But you would sort them maybe every hour, maybe, I don't know, we'll see, every 5 minutes maybe, I don't know. And then the player's rank will be updated, so rank 1 being the best player overall, and rank, 10,000, maybe a bit more than that being the worst. And maybe that could be split up into percentiles as well. But other than that, I think logistically it wouldn't be impossible. So as I said, I don't know how they store any of their data, or if they'd even be interested in adding this. They might not be. And as I said, I don't even know if other people would like this idea. But do let me know your thoughts. Have a good day.